Hello, everybody, and welcome. It's officially 2024, and that means another exciting year of challengers. If you don't know who I am, I'm Sleepy Boy, and last year I made my debut as a Valorant esports caster, and I started out right here on this YouTube channel doing my own little solo casting of the Challengers North America. Now, I started with the main event. I did not start with the qualifiers, but this time around, I'm prepared and I'm ready, a little bit more set up and in the groove of things, so I know what I'm doing coming into it. So, in case you don't know, the Valorant Challengers North America is a tournament to decide the top few teams, which will move on to the America's Ascension Tournament, which the winner of moves on to VCT 2025 or the Valorant Champions Tour 2025, which is the top tier. That's where you want to be. So Challengers is a way for teams to end up in that higher level league. And so it's a pretty exciting thing to start off with. And this year we do have a little bit of a newer introduction. We'll get into that coming into it as far as how the new system will work. There's some pretty exciting stuff revolving around the Premier system, so we'll get into right. We'll get right into that right now. Okay. Open Qualifiers 2024 will take place from January 31st to February 15th. There are going to be two qualifiers, the first one taking place on January 30th and ending on February 3rd. The second one taking place starting on February 12th and ending on February 15th. The way that it's going to work is there's going to be 5 total teams qualifying, 3 of which will come from the uh, yeah, 3 of which will come from the first qualifier, 2 of which will come from the second qualifier. So both qualifiers are going to have an upper and lower bracket. In order to get to contention for the lower bracket, you have to be in the top 32 teams. But if you make it to the top 32 teams, then you are in a double elimination bracket. So if you get knocked down to the lower bracket, you still have a chance to move forward. But you have to make it to the top 32 in order to get there, at which point the lower bracket will begin as they start to weed it down, or whittle it down rather. So you can sort of see here the way it's going to work. So January 10th, or by January 10th, which as I'm recording this, and as this video comes out on the 4th of January, you have 6 more days. So by January 10th, you need to achieve Immortal 3 rank or higher in the new act to qualify for the contender status. January 8th through 17th, you do need to register with a premier team in order to receive the contender status. Meaning you have to be on a premier team or you can't get the contender status. And there's a little bit of an asterisk to that. We'll see if it says it here. Players are allowed to participate in Premier with only one account. Ringers, substitutes, and cross-region play are not allowed. So one thing that's important to state as well is if you register with a Premier team, which you have to do in order to compete in Valorant Challengers as far as trying to qualify. If you're already in Challengers, you don't need to do all of that. But if you're trying to qualify, you do need to start out by registering with a Premier team. Now, this does not have to be the team that you're going to be playing with in Challengers. It's a little bit confusing, but if you're participating in the open qualifiers, you do not need to be playing with the team that you registered for Premier with. You just need to have the contender status, which you can get by joining any Premier team. So it's a little bit confusing, but that way people who decide, you know what, I made it to contender with this team, but I actually want to compete and try and qualify with this team over here, you can still do that, and that's still a valid way to do it. Now, there is still a way for your premier team to make it to challengers, which we'll talk about at the end. But yeah, so that's sort of the first thing to get out of the way. Everyone who wants to participate in challengers needs to be contender. I believe that is true even if you have already qualified or you're on a team that has already qualified. You still need to hit the contender status. Actually, no, I think I'm wrong about that one. Never mind. Pretend I didn't say anything. But yeah, I do think at the very least, if you want to try and qualify, you do need to hit the contender status, and you do that basically by just being the top in the first division of Premier. If you don't know what Premier is, you're probably not ready to qualify for challengers, but it is sort of a more tournament-style tournament for any group of 5 to compete in Valorant, with the goal being that if you are in the first division and you make it through your whole tournament, you can be at the contender status and have the opportunity to fight for challengers. So from January 17th to January 24th, the signups will go live for Open Qualifier number 1. team members can't already be on a team, on a challengers team, or an international team. Game changers rosters are eligible. And that's important to note. Just because you're a game changers player does not mean you are excluded from this, of course. And all players must be at least 16 years of age. Pretty standard stuff here. And we already talked about how all the players do need to be of the contender status. From January 29th to February 5th is when the registration for the open qualifier number 2 will start. Now, a reminder, the first open qualifier, 3 teams will qualify. The second open qualifier, only 2 teams will qualify. So if I were you, I would sign up for the first one where you have more of a chance. The second one's going to be do or die for every team that's in there, so it's going to be quite a bit of a heap. So this is all of the scheduling. I'm not going to read it all out, but I can tell you, the basics. Starting the 31st, you're going to have the round of 128 and the round of 64. So immediately you're going to whittle it down to the top 32, which, remember, is when the double elimination part of the bracket does start. So that's a pretty important number to get to, because that means you now have 2 lives instead of just 1. So day 2 will start on February 1st, and that would be the start of the double elimination bracket. So the round of 32 will start it off. 16 teams that win in that upper bracket move forward to the upper round of 16. The 16 teams that lose in that upper bracket go down to the lower bracket and start lower round 1, at which point you'll have the upper round of 16 start and lower round 1 start. Then same thing, whittles it down. The 8 teams that lose in the upper round of 16 move down to the lower bracket, and the 8 teams that win move on to the quarterfinals. So those will also play out on day 2. On day 3, the upper semifinals will both take place, and if you win the upper semifinal, you qualify to challengers. There's still going to be a finals, just because you can determine seedings and just so that way you see the top 2 teams from challenger qualifier number 1 and see how they stack up against one another. But all you have to do to qualify in the first qualifier in order to make it to challengers is just make it to the finals. If you make it to the finals, you're golden. And then also on day 3, lower round 3 and lower round 4 will take place at the exact same time. We're trying to make it super efficient. In just 4 days, get all of the qualifiers done, or not all of the qualifiers, but all of the games done in the first qualifier. There you go. So day 4, the final day of qualifier round 1. Gosh, I'm all over the place. It's going to be on February 3rd, and pretty standard stuff. We started 1, 2, 3, and 4, and now you go on to lower round 5, lower round 6, and lower round 7, the winner of which qualifies to challengers. Pretty fun. Open qualifier number 2, February 12th through 15th. So this is quite a bit of a jump. It's 9 days later, and again, you have actually during the time that qualifier number 1 takes place, you have an opportunity to apply for number 2. So if you get knocked out in number 1, you can still apply for that open qualifier number 2. And it's pretty much the exact same thing, with the exception being after you get through day 1, right, you're whittling it down to those 32 teams before the double elimination bracket starts. And then you move on and you have the upper round of 16 quarterfinals, lower round 1, lower round 2, the exact same as the first qualifiers. But then you get to day 3, February 14th, starts on Valentine's Day with me, is when you have a bit of a more exciting day, because you're going to have 3 series taking place. You have the upper semis, and if you remember, in open qualifier number 1, if you won the upper semis, you immediately qualify to challengers. That's not how it works in the open qualifier number 2, because like I said, there's 3 teams that qualify in number 1. There's only 2 that qualify in open qualifier number 2, and that means in order to qualify through the upper bracket, you have to win the finals. And so that's going to be determined on day 3, is who wins the upper semis and who wins the upper finals as well, and that's going to be one of your challengers qualifiers. Then day 4, the exact same as day 4 in open qualifier number 1. You get through the rest of the lower rounds. There's obviously an extra lower round because more people are being knocked down to that lower bracket. So yeah, that's pretty much how it's going to work. Now there is another opportunity, and this is what I said about the premier teams. So there is an opportunity to qualify for challengers simply through your premier team. You don't actually end up needing to completely just play on a challengers roster. You can do it yourself, just you, team at home. You don't even need a manager or a coach or an analyst. You can do it yourself with just your friends. The same way you would compete in Premier, you can compete just like this as a contender, and you can earn a spot in contention basically to get into Challengers. So another opportunity to qualify for Challengers North America will come from competing in Premier. To earn a spot in Challengers North America, teams will need to qualify for the Contenders Premier playoffs, meaning you've already achieved that contender status, as has everyone who made it to the Open Qualifiers, but you need to do enough that you qualify to the Contenders Premier playoffs. Teams that qualify will compete against the at-risk teams in Challengers, so the teams that are already in Challengers, and you have an opportunity to steal their spot and get yourself into Challengers, and you even have the opportunity to make it through to Ascension if you obviously win Challengers. So yeah, that's pretty much all there is for right now. So the end of the month, end of January, is the start of Open Qualifier number 1. I plan on doing exactly what I did last year, right here on this YouTube channel, just streaming, solo casting, working you all through the wonderful game, but my way. So if you'd like to see that, you can, of course, scroll down, see if you're subscribed, and if you are already, thank you so much. And if you aren't, I hope you'd consider it, so that way you can see my wonderful, beautiful casting. Yeah, that's pretty much it for me. I'm very excited to get started with Challengers 2024. Let's see who takes the top spot. But for now, that's gonna be it for me, and I'll see you all when I see you.